Hello, class. It's nice meeting you all today. I am Andrew C. Salonga, your teacher in economics, or you can call me Teacher Drew. So, before we start our class today, let us have a prayer. May I request somebody in the class to lead a prayer? Yes, Mr. Palagchosa, you may lead the prayer. Amen. It's a good day to start with our smile in our faces. Moving on, let us have first check our attendance. Is anybody in the class absent? Nobody? Well, it's great to hear that nobody is absent. So, moving on, what we have tackled yesterday is all about, yes, Mr. Lumba, about the law of demand and supply. Yes, you got it right. So, our topic for today is all about budget deficit and surplus. But before we move on to that, let us have first the objectives of our class discussion today. First is discuss the components of budget deficit and surplus, analyze the causes of budget deficit and surplus, and illustrate the differences between budget deficit and surplus. Our outline of the study is to discuss the components of budget deficit and surplus, and the causes of budget deficit and surplus, and lastly, the assessment. Key takeaways. Key takeaways are the terms that we are going to discuss in our class for today. You can see it here. Next. Okay, if you have questions, you may ask after I've discussed our topic for today. So before we go to what is budget deficit and surplus, let us first define what is budget. Okay, what is budget for you, class? Does anybody in the class has the opinion or any answer of what is budget? Yes? Yes, Consolation, Mr. Consolation. Yes, correct. Okay, a budget is just a document that itemizes anticipated income and expenses during a period of time and is often used for planning as it helps you determine what you probably will earn, what you must spend, or what will you do with the money left over. It's budget. Okay, next is the components of budget. There are two components of budget. First is budget revenue and second is budget capital. Budget revenue, it deals with the revenue aspect of government budget. It explains how revenue is generated or collected by the government and how it is allocated among various expenditure heads. Under with it is the revenue receipts and revenue expenditure. Second is budget capital. It deals with the capital aspect of government budget and it is consists of capital receipts and capital expenditure. Moving on, let's have the types of budgets. There are three types of budgets, namely balanced budget, surplus budget, and deficit budget. May I request somebody in the class to read what is balanced budget? Yes, Mr. Luchin. Thank you. Okay, balanced budget. Government budget is said to be balanced budget if estimated government receipts are equal to the estimated government expenditure. You can see it here in my presentation that expenditures and revenue is balanced. Next is budget surplus, or the economics term for fiscal surplus. This is an amount of resources or asset that exceeds the utilized portion. It's commonly used in the description of excess assets such as capital, income, profits and goods occurs when there is a disequilibrium between demand and supply. The disequilibrium is distorts the product flow in the market. To ease this, the government may set a price floor, which is the minimum price under which product or services should be sold. In budgets, a surplus occurs when income exceeds the expenditure. Next is the budget deficit. May I request somebody in the class to read? Okay, thank you. Budget deficit. This is a situation whereby a required resources, especially money, is less than what is required. Hence, expenses exceeds revenues. In a budget, the flow of money falls short of the outflow, which can be result of overspending. Example is what we are experiencing today. Our government has an emergency funds, but it isn't enough. So what's the solution for this is to borrow money from other country just to um, just to supply the lack of our materials in hospitals, such as the equipment of the doctors and nurses. Especially, we are having a vaccination, so it is it is the government who plan to borrow money from other country because we are lack of budget in emergency funds. So a lot of disaster and phenomenon had happened in our country that this actually result to budget deficit. And next, the causes of budget deficit and surplus. There are three causes of budget deficit. First is the absence of emergency fund, just what like I have said earlier, and the politics and low revenues. I mean low revenues. Politics, politics because a lot of politics mas ginauna pa nila ang pag-budget sa ilang campaign in the future than budgeting what we need for today. So it happens to have a budget deficit because of the politics. And effects of budget deficit, these are the limited access to investors, the increase in debt, low rate of economic development. Yes, of course, increase in debt. Our country would have increase in utang, for short, the debt, and also limited access to investors and low rate of economic development, but not merely a huge impact, but low rate of economic development, because as for now, our presidents had planned for the big build program. So when we build a lot of infrastructure in the near future, this will be um, useful and advantage for them because they can use these facilities for the businesses and other useful for our economic development. So next is the causes of budget supply, a budget surplus. I mean, when growth is in revenue exceeds growth in expenditure, or following the reduction is cost or spending or both. And second is increase in taxes. Of course, this these are the this is a major example of budget surplus. When the taxes of our employees increases, so government would have a lot of money to save for the near future. And the effects of budget surplus, the impact of growth, declining government debt, and deflation. Next, the difference between budget deficit and surplus. The budget deficit and surplus is way too different. The government expenditure example, in surplus, government expenditure is high, and in deficit budget, government expenditure is lower. The effects on tax, in budget surplus, tax reduction may occur, and then in deficit, taxes may be increased in budget deficit. That's all, class. If you have a question, you may raise your hands. Anybody? That's well. It's good to hear that everybody understand our discussion for today. So moving on, let's have our assessment. Our assessment are 5 questions. You may answer it briefly and concise. So that would be all, class. If you're done answering your assessment, you may pass it in front. No more questions? Okay.